Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. My former supervisor, David, is the most despicable person I've ever encountered. He had a habit of tormenting anyone he disliked in various cruel ways. A few months ago, I was at a family gathering in a local park taking a walk with my young cousin Tommy, who has Down syndrome. Despite his developmental challenges, Tommy manages quite well, but he's always been sensitive about people mocking his appearance or condition. We were enjoying our leisurely stroll, both of us savoring the pleasant spring day. As we walked, I spotted David heading our way. I inwardly cringed but forced a smile and greeted him politely. David sneered. "Well, look what we have here. A pair of ugly dimwits out for a walk." Tommy immediately burst into tears as David cackled and continued on his way. I ignored David and focused on comforting Tommy, who was completely distraught for several minutes. Eventually, I managed to calm him down by reminding him of all the wonderful friends and family who love him, emphasizing that David was just a mean stranger whose opinion didn't matter. As we resumed our walk, I noticed David at a nearby picnic area with his wife and teenage daughter. It seemed he had been on his way back from the restrooms when he encountered us. My anger reignited. I returned to our family gathering and pulled aside my cousin Mark to tell him what had happened. Mark wanted to retaliate against David, but I reminded him that this was my boss. I didn't want David to suspect my involvement, as it would only make my work life even more miserable. So Mark asked if I knew anything about David that might be useful. I shared several details about David, but the key information was his fondness for a specific craft beer he often drank at a local pub. David had mentioned drinking there the previous Friday while his wife and daughter were visiting relatives. I also recalled David's recent story about his wife's obsession with a particular pop culture character. Let's call it Baby Yeti. Apparently, she kept a stuffed Baby Yeti on their bed at all times. I stayed away from the revenge setup to avoid being seen by David, but Mark filled me in on the details afterward. It went something like this. Mark approached David, putting an arm around his shoulders and attempting to kiss him. David shoved him away. David, what the hell are you doing? His family was now watching intently. Mark, I'm just thrilled to see you again, honey. Last Friday night was incredible. David, what are you talking about? Mark, come on, you're not going to pretend you don't remember, are you? I know you had quite a few of those Hoppy Valley IPAs at the Rusty Nail, but surely you remember what happened afterward. David, nothing happened. I don't even know who you are. Mark, really? You were screaming my name on Friday. David, face turning red. You lying piece of... David's wife, interrupting. Excuse me, I don't know who you are, but this is my husband. You must be confusing him with someone else. Please leave us alone. Mark. Oh no, there's no confusion. We had the most amazing night together on Friday, and now he's acting like he doesn't know me. David's wife. I told you this is my husband. You're mistaken. Mark. Oh, maybe I am. I guess it wasn't your husband who took me back to his place on Maple Street and had incredible sex with me right next to that stuffed Baby Yeti on the bed. My apologies. Mark turned and walked away. David's wife. Oh my God, David, what is wrong with you? Are you gay now? Seriously? To cut a long story short, David's wife had already been unhappy in their marriage, and this incident was the final straw that led her to file for divorce soon after. In the following months, David frequently complained at work about how he didn't care about his wife but missed his daughter terribly and hated living in his new apartment compared to his old house. Every time he whined about his ruined home life at work, I knew it was the consequence of his cruelty toward a developmentally disabled child. The best part was that he never suspected my involvement at all. The next one is an entitled people story. I never thought I'd be telling a story about how refusing to serve someone coffee would lead to accusations of kidnapping my own kid, but here we are. Buckle up, because this one's a wild ride. I've been working at this little coffee shop downtown for about 5 years now. It's a cozy place, family-owned, and we've got a loyal bunch of regulars who come in for their daily fix. I like my job, the smell of fresh coffee, the hum of conversation, and the satisfaction of making someone's day a little brighter with a perfect latte. But every rose has its thorn, and ours came in the form of Karen. Now, I know Karen has become a bit of a meme, but trust me, this woman lived up to every stereotype. She'd come in at least 3 times a week, always with some ridiculous customized order that wasn't even on our menu. And God forbid we get it wrong, she'd throw a fit that would make a toddler look well behaved. One particularly busy Saturday morning, Karen strutted in like she owned the place. I was working the counter, and as soon as I saw her, I felt a headache coming on. I want a venti, half-whole milk, 1/4 1%, 1/4 non-fat, extra hot, split quad shots, no foam latte with whip, 2 packets of Splenda, 1 sugar in the raw, a touch of vanilla syrup, and 3 short sprinkles of cinnamon. I blinked at her. Ma'am, I'm sorry, but we don't have those milk options, and our sizes are small, medium, and large. Karen's face turned an impressive shade of red. What do you mean you don't have those options? The other coffee shop does. Well, we're not the other coffee shop, I replied, trying to keep my cool. We can make you a latte with whole milk or non-fat milk, and add some cinnamon if you'd like. This is ridiculous, she screeched. I want to speak to your manager. I sighed. I am the manager on duty today, ma'am. That's when things really went off the rails. Karen started yelling about how incompetent we all were, how she was going to get us shut down, and how she'd never come back again, if only that were true. As this was happening, my 8-year-old daughter, Lily, came out from the back room. It was take your kid to work day, and I brought her along to show her what I do. She looked scared by all the commotion. Mommy, what's going on? She asked, tugging on my apron. Before I could answer, Karen's eyes locked onto Lily like a heat-seeking missile. Who is this? She demanded. This is my daughter, I said, putting a protective arm around Lily. And I'm going to have to ask you to leave now. You're disturbing our other customers. Karen's eyes narrowed. No, she said, her voice dripping with venom. I don't think I will leave, not until I get my coffee. Ma'am, I've already explained that we can't make the exact drink you want. Now please leave before I have to call the police. That's when Karen played her trump card. She pulled out her phone and started dialing. Hello, police? Yes, I'd like to report a kidnapping. I'm at the downtown coffee shop and there's a woman here who has abducted a child. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My jaw dropped as Karen continued her ridiculous story, claiming that she'd witnessed me dragging Lily into the shop against her will. By this point, the other customers in the shop were watching the scene unfold with a mix of horror and fascination. One of our regulars, a kind older man named Bob, stepped forward. Now hold on just a minute, he said to Karen. I've been coming here for years. That's her daughter, plain as day. You can't go around making false accusations like that. Karen ignored him, still yammering away on the phone. I was in shock, but I knew I had to do something. I turned to my coworker, Jake. Call the real police, I told him, and see if you can pull up the security camera footage from this morning. Within minutes, we could hear sirens approaching. 2 police officers walked in, looking confused. Karen immediately pounced on them. Officers! Thank goodness you're here. This woman, she pointed an accusing finger at me, has kidnapped this poor child. The officers looked at me, then at Lily, who was clinging to my leg, clearly terrified. Ma'am, one of them said to Karen, can you explain why you think this is a kidnapping situation? As Karen launched into her fabricated tale, I calmly explained the situation to the other officer. Jake brought over his phone showing the security footage from earlier that morning, clearly depicting me arriving at work with Lily. The officers quickly realized what was going on. They pulled Karen aside and had a stern talk with her about the consequences of making false police reports. But the story doesn't end there. Remember Bob, our regular customer? Turns out he's a retired lawyer. He overheard the whole thing and approached me after the police had taken Karen away. You know, he said, you have a pretty solid case for defamation and harassment here. If you're interested, I'd be happy to help you pursue legal action. I was hesitant at first, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that Karen needed to face consequences for her actions. What if she did this to someone else who didn't have witnesses or camera footage to back them up? So, with Bob's help, we filed a lawsuit against Karen. The case went to court, and let me tell you, it was satisfying to watch Karen squirm as the judge tore into her for her behavior. In the end, the judge ruled in our favor. Karen was ordered to pay a significant fine and perform community service. She was also banned from coming within 500 feet of our coffee shop. The whole ordeal was stressful, but it had a silver lining. Our little coffee shop got some positive local news coverage out of it, and business has been booming ever since. We even added a new drink to our menu, the Karen Comeuppance, a simple no-frills latte that's become quite popular. As for Lily, well, she learned some valuable lessons about standing up to bullies and the importance of telling the truth. And me? I've got a great story to tell at parties, and the satisfaction of knowing that sometimes justice really does prevail. So next time you're in a coffee shop and you see someone giving the staff a hard time, remember this story. And maybe, just maybe, order a Karen Comeuppance in solidarity with all the service workers out there dealing with difficult customers every day. The next one is a petty revenge story. I am a grocery store cashier for a very small chain in southeastern Michigan. For 6 hours a day, 4 days a week, I ring order after order of groceries. Believe me, it gets monotonous. About a week or two ago, it was a super busy day. I had been going non-stop for 2 hours, with no time between customers. That's when, during the short 5-minute lull that miraculously arrived, Karen came along. I went through my usual spiel, hi, how are you, paper or plastic, etc., and started ringing her groceries. She had a lot of fruits and veggies, which is cool, better than some of the things I have to ring. Don't ask, seriously. And then came the grapes. Now, don't get me wrong, I love grapes. Sweet, crunchy, tart, and they don't require really any prep before you can eat them. Yum! No, my issue was with the large spider that was in the bag with the grapes. I have a serious spider phobia. When I was a kid, a spider, no idea which kind, we were on a family biking trip through a nearby nature trail when it happened, bit me on the arm. And over the course of a few days, my parents just thought it was a mosquito bite at first. It swelled up into a big, hard lump the size of a softball. I still vividly remember the night they finally realized that they needed to take action, and rushed me to the nearest hospital ER. Traumatizing. Ever since, I can't see a spider without shrieking and freezing up. Any other bug in the house? No problem. I see a spider, one of my brothers has to come rescue me. So, as you can imagine, the large bag of grape spider did not go over well. I managed to mostly quell the shriek, instead letting out a strangled yelp, and jolted back from the register an offending bag and refused to touch it again until the spider was very dead. My grocery store is one of those that still has a separate bagger job, so I wasn't alone at the register. The very nice kid who was my current bagger was kind enough to come around and remove the spider-infested sack of fruit and went to get Karen a new bag. I apologized and started to scan again, and as soon as he left, the ridicule began. It was just a spider, why did you freak out? Are you seriously telling me that a grown-ass woman had to have a teenage boy rescue her from an itsy-bitsy spider? How pathetic, just get over it, it was the size of a pea at best. I carried that bag all the way over here. I'm scared of spiders and I was just fine. You shouldn't have had an issue swiping it and moving on for 5 seconds. And so on and so forth. Meanwhile, I just had to sit there and smile at her. As soon as he came back, she shut up and was a smiles and compliments for such a nice young man. That was where I decided to get petty. Now, in my store, produce is rung one of 2 ways. It might be the same everywhere, I don't know, but anyway. It is either rung up by count or by weight, so we have a scale built into the register to weigh items. Grapes are priced weight, so I went ahead and dropped the nice new spider-free bag on the scale, and while I typed in the produce code, I made sure to ever so stealthily place my thumb on that scale and apply the slightest bit of pressure, magically turning 2 lbs 7OZ into 4 albs 2Os, and at $3.99 per pound it made a difference. Mind you, Karen had a huge order, so that Walb 7OZ didn't that noticeably affect the total. But if Karen was gonna mock me like that, then turn around like she'd done nothing wrong and praise my coworker, she was gonna have to pay for it. And pay for it she did. The next one is a malicious compliance story. I worked as a writer and editor for over a decade, and in that time I had my fair share of bad bosses, like anyone. But there is one that completely takes the cake. I worked for a large media company that had dealings with a number of other companies and subsidiaries ranging from publishing to fashion to sports to tech. You name it, they did it. How our writing department worked was each writer would have specific areas that they would write for, kind of like how journalists have beats they cover. So if you were assigned to the fashion arm of the company or one of its partners/subsidiaries, you wrote or edited everything for that arm. I worked for this company for about a year and a half before a new manager was hired. She was the second in command of our department. Part of her and our department director's job was to update our internal style guide when necessary. For those that don't know, a style guide is a reference document for how to either refer to things or how to format things for the company partners. Before her tenure as manager, this was only done maybe once or twice a year, and the changes were relatively minimal since the style guide was very well established in the company and had been in place for a number of years. After she came on, it was being updated at least once a week, if not multiple times a week. It legitimately became an obsession for her. Aside from the general annoyance of keeping up with it, it didn't take long for me and my coworkers to reach the conclusion that our new manager didn't have the faintest idea what she was doing. Each new version had more and more glaring errors. At first, we all ignored these changes, giving her the benefit of the doubt and hoping, albeit naively, that these new directives were mistakes. That was until people started getting reprimanded for not following the style guide. I was the first to get a one-on-one closed-door talk. One of the departments I wrote for was sports, and she had seen that I had not been following the new rule of how I was to refer to the men's and women's teams I covered. Truthfully, I had willfully ignored it, hoping that it was just a mistake. To my horror, however, it appeared my new writing manager didn't understand basic grammar. You see, the change she implemented removed the apostrophe from men's and women's. So, for example, if I was covering men's basketball, I was to refer to it as men's basketball. Her rationale was that the men didn't own the team, therefore, it should not be possessive. Apparently, her understanding of the English language didn't evolve past grade school explanations. I was honestly pretty dumbfounded at first, but once I got over the initial shock that the second in command of our department didn't realize men's was not a word, I tried bleakly to explain that men is already plural and that a possessive es doesn't always denote direct ownership. Read, men's bathroom. She stared blankly at me for a few seconds, and for the briefest of moments, I thought maybe I was seeing the cogs in her head turn. She, however, doubled down. Realizing the fight was lost, I told her that I would implement the changes going forward. Now here's where my malicious compliance comes in. We worked for, and with, some very high-profile companies, and mistakes were not tolerated for things that were outward-facing. Realizing her idiocy could cost me my job, I made a simple request. Could you please email me the exact style guide rule you're referencing and how exactly you'd like me to implement it with examples of where I messed up? She looked at me like I was stupid for not understanding what was being asked of me, but she still wrote it all down in an email for me. I also made sure any further style changes were referenced in an email and specifically asked that if there were further changes to please cite how I had done them in the past, along with how she would like them to be done from now on. Sure enough, within about 6 months of this, I was fired. And at my exit interview, I handed HR a folder containing every written communication regarding the style changes, along with quite a bit of evidence that she was passing off her projects to other members of the DEPT and changing people's work behind their back. She was fired 3 months after me, along with our department director 3 months after that. Turned out my little folder sparked a full investigation by HR, and after interviewing other coworkers in the department, they realized she had done all of it to have grounds to fire people within the department she didn't like. I just happened to be the first on the chopping block. The projects she was passing off to other people, she was taking the credit for what they were doing to make herself look good. Those changes she was making to other people's work, HR realized that she was changing things to make it explicitly incorrect. You gotta love software that tracks changes and timestamps and lists the user. On top of all of this, they also discovered that she had at best exaggerated and at worst fabricated large swaths of her resume. By the time she was fired, I had already found another job in a different department at the same company. It was a good gig, and my new manager wasn't a complete idiot. Eventually, I moved on from that company, but if anything, my time there taught me a very valuable lesson. Document, and document some more. The next one is an entitled people story. My housemate and I are in our 20s and live in a unit block with a remote-controlled gate and allocated parking spaces. It's pretty common for residents and tradespeople to park in the shared driveway inside or outside the gate for short periods of time while unloading large items, since there's very rarely available street parking nearby, and everyone is usually pretty chill about it. My housemate and I are moving and figured a way to get both of our cars into the car park to load with boxes furniture so we don't have to be constantly shuffling cars. Our car spot is the one at the farthest end of the car park next to the building. My car was parked there, and my housemate was parked behind me, which doesn't block the driveway or any other parking spot, only the one that belongs to me. We've spoken to the owners of the 2 closest parking spots about it, and they said it's totally fine because we only do it for short periods of time, and anyway it doesn't block them getting in or out of their spots. This morning, while we were inside getting boxes, our elderly neighbor from 3 spots down took offense to the fact that my housemate's car wasn't in an allocated bay. So he decided to park across 2 other units' parking spaces to block us in. We came outside, finished packing, and tried to get out around his car, but there wasn't enough room, so we found out whose car it was and my housemate went to knock on the door. First, he refused to open his door to speak to her, so my housemate, who is deaf, came to get me because she couldn't hear what he was saying with the door between them, but she could hear that he was yelling and she wasn't comfortable. I went to talk to him and he also yelled at me through the door and wouldn't open it to speak to me until I specifically asked if he could so we could work it out face to face. Then he initially refused to move his car and kept saying he was going to call the police and have us fined, despite the fact that he was also parked illegally. I pointed that out and he told me it was different for him because he's an owner. His granddaughter had to come out and convince him to just move his car into his unobstructed car spot so my housemate could leave. He finally came outside and started pointing at the no visitor parking signs. I apologized and told him that we do live there and we are moving out, hence why we needed to have both cars there, to pack. He refused to believe me. I have met this man several times and introduced myself by name and unit number, and I say hello every time I see him around, but I guess he didn't remember my face because he was convinced we were guests and demanding to know who we were visiting and how we got through the gate. I said we used our gate remote. He kept talking over me and asking where we'd gotten a gate remote and who had given to us. I said, the real estate because we live here, and asked if he would like to come to our unit and see all the moving boxes inside to prove that we were who we said we were, and he just walked off. He finally got in his car and moved it into his parking spot, and my housemate left in her car, and I waited for him to finish very, very slowly parking so I could apologize again and thank him for working it out. While I was waiting, his daughter/granddaughter came outside and apologized to me for his behavior, and I explained why we're parked like that, and she was really nice and understanding. When he finally finished parking, I went up to him, said thank you and sorry, it won't happen again. He blew straight past me and didn't acknowledge that I was standing there speaking to him at all. It really felt like the way a little kid storms off after losing an argument, and I was pretty shocked to have a fully grown adult behave so rudely when I was being polite and thanking him, even though he was the only problem in the situation. The kicker is, my housemate's car was nowhere near his parking spot, and not obstructing anything, it just wasn't in an allocated bay. His car, however, was blocking the driveway, 2 of the neighbors' car parking spots, and at least 4 cars, but since he's an owner and we're just lowly renters, he fully believed we were the ones in the wrong. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already.